Predictably, the federal plan starts to go wrong from the moment it commences early the next morning after McDowell's briefing with his officers. No one has any experience of trying to move troops in these numbers, over unfamiliar ground on narrow or barely existent roads. Moreover, these are volunteers, still unfamiliar with their orders and drum and bugle calls and not entirely adjusted yet to some wet-eared corporal or sergeant bawling orders at them. McDowell wants to start his march at 2 a.m. on Sunday, July 21st, 1861. Brigadier General Robert C. Schenck's 2nd Brigade of Tyler's 1st Division, the first to depart, does not start until an hour later. Then the going proves difficult in the dark, the men sometimes feeling their way and thus moving at a snail's pace. It takes an hour to cover just the first half mile, thus delaying Colonel William Tecumseh Sherman's 3rd Brigade immediately behind. Brigadier General Tyler does his best to push these men forward, but it still would be nearly daylight before they covered the short distance to the north bank facing the stone bridge. The slowness of their movement thus naturally slows Hunter and Heintzelman, who for a time have to march behind Tyler's men before they can turn off on the path to Sudley Springs Ford. Facing them on the north side of Bull Run and concealed on the hills immediately overlooking the stone bridge is the small command of Colonel Nathan G. Shanks Evans, one of the true eccentrics of the Confederate Army. The South Carolinian is boastful, swaggering, and hard drinking, his headquarters tent always having a keg of his favorite whiskey ready for him. Yet he is also a born fighter. He would scrap with anybody, including his own superiors. But most of all, he would prefer to fight with the Yankees, and on this day, his first opportunity, he would prove himself a terror. Evans has only the 4th South Carolina under Colonel John B. E. Sloan and 1st Louisiana Special Battalion of Major Chatham R. Wheat, 2 cannon from 2nd Lieutenant George S. Davidson's 2nd Section Lynchburg, Virginia Artillery, and a company of cavalry, essentially a regiment and 1/2, to face Tyler's entire division. Lesser men would have recoiled when they saw the advanced elements of the Yankees approach. Colonel Shanks Evans embraces the opportunity for a good fight. At 5 a.m., the lead elements of Tyler's division arrives at their designated halting points just beyond the stone bridge over Bull Run. 2nd Lieutenant Peter C. Haynes' 2nd Section of Company G, 1st U.S. Artillery, Captain James H. Carlisle's Company E, 2nd U.S. Artillery, and Captain Romaine B. Ayres' Company E, 3rd U.S. Artillery. With permission from General Tyler, these federal batteries begin unlimbering into position on the hill crest beyond Stone Bridge. Lieutenant Haynes' section, attached to Carlisle's battery, consists of a single heavy 30-pounder Parrott rifle that the men fondly nickname Long Tom. Captain Carlisle's battery is organized with 2 13-pounder James rifles, 2 12-pounder howitzers, and 2 6-pounder field guns. Ayres' battery, typically referred to in reports as Sherman's battery due to being organized into Sherman's 3rd Brigade, is comprised of 2 10-pounder Parrott rifles, 2 12-pounder howitzers, and 2 6-pounders. At 5:15 that morning, the opening shots of the battle are fired by 2nd Lieutenant Haynes' 30-pounder Long Tom. A salvo of 3 solid-shot rounds are fired across Bull Run at the supposed position of the rebels on the opposite end of the stream near Stone Bridge. Moments later, Carlisle's and Ayres' batteries join in the bombardment, lobbing solid-shot rounds at shadowy figures they spot in the woods above Stone Bridge. The battle is on. For the next hour and a half, the 3 Federal artillery units fire shot and shell across Bull Run, hoping to bait the Confederates into revealing their positions as part of General Tyler's diversion. Meanwhile, Colonel Israel B. Richardson's 4th Brigade has begun its own diversionary attack along Mitchell's and Blackburn's fords, intending to keep the Confederate units there occupied and preventing them from reinforcing the Stone Bridge sector. The guns of 1st Lieutenant John Edwards' 1st Section, a Company G, 1st U.S. Artillery, as well as Captain Henry J. Hunt's Company M, 2nd U.S. Artillery, fire heavy salvos of artillery shells across the fords over Bull Run. One of the rounds from the artillery bombardment by Richardson's brigade ends up crashing through the roof of Wilmer McLean's house as Brigadier General P.G.T. Beauregard is eating his breakfast. This violent interruption to his early morning meal quickly alerts the Army of the Potomac commander that the battle is on, and sooner than he has hoped. Beauregard begins to fall into McDowell's trap, riding out to alert his brigades to focus their efforts on the Federal activity at the Stone Bridge, as well as Mitchell's and Blackburn's fords. Despite the continued harassing fire from the Federal artillery across Bull Run, Colonel Evans refuses to be duped by General Tyler's feint. He keeps his own 2 guns silent, not wanting to reveal to Tyler just how weak his thin line actually is, and only dispatches a small line of skirmishers from his brigade, namely Company B, 1st Louisiana Special Battalion, and Companies J and K for South Carolina, to return the sporadic fire from across Stone Bridge. Thus, Tyler has no inkling of the knowledge that he can easily push across a bridge with one concerted thrust. He merely throws out his own skirmishers from the 1st and 2nd Ohio and 2nd New York State Militia, all part of Schenck's brigade, to exchange sporadic fire with the thin rebel skirmish line. By 7:30 a.m., Evan deduces that Tyler has no intention of attacking. He rightfully assumes that the Federal attack on the Stone Bridge is only a demonstration, and that could mean only one thing: that Tyler wants to keep him pinned at the bridge and divert his attention away from something else. Soon after, around 8:45, Evan discovers just what that is when 8 miles southwest on the Confederate communications outpost atop Signal Hill, he receives a message via wigwag semaphore signaling, a first in warfare, from Captain Edward Porter Alexander, Chief Signal Officer in Beauregard's staff. "Look out for your left! Your position is turned." From Signal Hill, Captain Alexander and his crew had spotted dust arising from the distant cart trails beyond Bull Run near Sully Springs, accompanied soon after by the glimmer of bayonets in the beaming sunlight. McDowell's flank attack has been uncovered by the Confederates. Leaving his skirmisher companies along the Stone Bridge and Bull Run to watch for movement from Tyler's division, Evan hastily leads the remainder of his brigade, just 900 men, west on the Warrenton Turnpike. He stops at the intersection with the Manassas-Sudley Road, where he sets up his command on Buck Hill, close to Matthew's Tavern, also locally known as the Stone House. Meanwhile, around 9:30 a.m., over a mile and a half to the north, the head of Colonel David Hunter's 2nd Division marching column, Colonel Ambrose E. Burnside's 2nd Brigade, arrives at Sully Springs Ford after hours of grueling and difficult marching through the windy roads and narrow cart trails leading to the crossing. After a short delay, Burnside's column crosses Bull Run at the ford and continues south down the Manassas-Sudley Road. Colonel Samuel P. Heitzelman's 3rd Division, rather than crossing Bull Run at Poplar Ford as planned, instead follows Hunter's division across Sully Springs Ford, causing major backups and congestion in the movement of marching columns across the ford and delaying overall movements on McDowell's timetable. At 10:30 a.m., Colonel Burnside's 2nd Brigade marching column, still moving south down the road but approaching the intersection with the Warrenton Turnpike, comes into full view of Colonel Evans' 900 men posted at the bottom of Matthews Hill in front of Buck Hill. The 4th South Carolina and 1st Louisiana Special Battalion level their muskets and deliver a concentrated volley on the lead column of Burnside's brigade, Colonel John S. Slocum's 2nd Rhode Island Regiment. Meanwhile, Evans' 2 6-pounder field guns from the Lynchburg Artillery under Lieutenants Davidson and Leftwick unlimber on Buck Hill with Evans' command, fire shot and shell into the columns. Burnside immediately orders Slocum's regiment to move off the road and deploy into line of battle on the crest of Matthews Hill. Soon after the 2nd Rhode Island forms into line on Matthews Hill, the 2nd Rhode Island Battery, comprised of 6 14-pounder James rifles under Captain William H. Reynolds gallops onto the hill crest and unlimbers in support of the infantry. As the 2nd Rhode Island, now joined by artillery support from Reynolds' battery, begins to steadily push back Evans' men, Major Wheat's 1st Louisiana Battalion fixes bayonets, draws their bowie knives, and charges across a wheat field to their front, intending to storm the Rhode Islanders' positions on Matthews Hill. This tactic has previously worked well for Major Wheat back when he had put down peasant revolts in South America, but it would prove deadly to his men this day. Just before 11 o'clock, Wheat's battalion is driven back in its charge, having failed to reach the Federal lines due to heavy musket fire and canister shells from Reynolds' battery. However, as Wheat's Tigers are making their way back towards their original positions on Buck Hill, they begin to take friendly fire from the 4th South Carolina. A cluster of trees separates the 4th South Carolina from Wheat's original battle line, making communication between the two units difficult. When the Tigers had charged, the South Carolinians are unaware of their plan. Seeing the blue and red uniformed troops rushing back down Matthews Hill, the 4th South Carolina had panicked and opened fire. The Louisianians returned fire during the confusing incident, and it takes several minutes for Major Wheat and Colonel Sloan to restore order to the ranks. The Confederates are not the only ones confused by the meeting engagement. With the men's spirits up in the 2nd Rhode Island after repulsing Wheat's charge, Colonel Slocum rushes in front of his men, brandishing his saber, and shouts, "Now let's show them what Rhode Island can do!" He surges forward with his sword pointed at the enemy, expecting his men to follow with fixed bayonets. However, very few actually join in the colonel's spirited attempt at a charge. Colonel Slocum, now running down Matthews Hill alone, attempts to mount across the split rail fence at the bottom of the slope. As he struggles over the fence, a rebel bullet thuds across his skull, splitting it open. Slocum falls down from the rail, having been killed instantly. Corporal Eliza Hunt Rhodes and another private from Company B rush down the hill under enemy fire to retrieve the body of their fallen colonel and drag it back into their lines. With Slocum dead, command of the regiment falls upon Lieutenant Colonel Frank Whedon, who orders his men to continue firing into the enemy. However, the 2nd Rhode Island, still the only infantry unit on the hill, is suffering mounting casualties at an alarming rate. Reynolds' battery tries its best to support the infantry, but the artillerymen are suffering losses too. By now, the 4th South Carolina and 1st Louisiana Battalion have reformed their lines and are firing volleys with deadly precision on the Federals. Evans' outnumbered men steadily aim and rapidly lose concentrated volleys on the Bluecoats, inflicting heavy losses. Captain Levi Tower, commander of Company F in the 2nd Rhode Island, falls dead with 2 bullets piercing his chest. Major Sullivan Ballou, commanding the left wing of the 2nd Rhode Island, attempts to encourage his battalion when he is suddenly thrown to the ground by an artillery shell from Davidson's gun on Buck Hill. When the smoke clears, his men find Major Ballou sprawled across the grass, dying and covered in blood. A week earlier, Major Ballou had written a letter to his wife with a premonition of his death in the battle to come. That premonition had come true, and just as he had wrote to Sarah Ballou in his letter, which she would not receive until after the war, Sullivan Ballou's last gasping breaths uttered the name of his beloved wife. Realizing that he needs to reinforce the 2nd Rhode Island, Colonel Hunter orders up Colonel Andrew Porter's 1st Brigade, leaving the rest of Burnside's unemployed regiments to squander precious minutes standing idly by the side of the road. Assuming he would follow Burnside's brigade into the fight, Porter deploys behind his comrades' reserve regiments. This confuses deployment and wastes 30 minutes while the 2nd Rhode Island suffers serious losses confronting Evans' brigade of 900 Southerners. Before the pair of Union brigades can go into the fight, Colonel David Hunter falls with a serious neck wound and quits the field, turning his command over to Burnside and his senior division adjutant, 1st Lieutenant William Averill. At 11 a.m., Burnside orders his brigade forward. Unfortunately for the Federals, he does so in a piecemeal fashion. The gray-uniformed 2nd New Hampshire, led by Colonel Gilman Marston, advances on the west side of the road, where it does nothing to provide assistance to the embattled 2nd Rhode Island as its directionless men mill about in a field with their haversacks lying in the grass. The 71st New York State Militia takes too long to get ready, since their commander, Colonel Henry P. Martin, orders his men to lie down in the field across the road from Matthews Hill. Burnside angrily demands that the regiment move forward. Colonel Martin blatantly refuses to advance until the regiment's 2 attached boat howitzers from Company I, led by Captain Augustus Van Horn of Ellis, have moved up to support the infantry. Frustrated at Martin's refusal to advance, Burnside is prompted to bring up the last column in his brigade, his own former regiment, the 1st Rhode Island, which is now under Major Joseph P. Balch, and he quickly sends it into the fight. Colonel Burnside also orders his aide-de-camp, Rhode Island's very own governor, William Sprague IV, to gallop onto Matthews Hill and oversee the regiment's deployment while Burnside tries to get the rest of his brigade moving. The 2nd Rhode Island shifts further east upon seeing their approach of the 1st Rhode Island, leaving a space between themselves and Reynolds' battery for their sister regiment to occupy. During the deployment, Governor Sprague tumbles from his horse into the smoky grass after an artillery shell blows the beast apart. The stunned Rhode Island governor, with his glasses shattered and his face covered in dirt and black powder, is helped up from the ground by 2 men before mounting another horse and continuing on with his assigned duties. As the Federals are redeploying on Matthews Hill at 11:15, they spot dust clouds off in the distance further south of the intersection. Near the Henry House Hill, these are the Confederate reinforcements of B's and Bartow's brigades from Johnston's Army of the Shenandoah. Both brigades deploy about 150 yards north of the Henry House. Bartow's brigade is posted to the west, and the 2nd Mississippi and 4th Alabama regiments of B's brigade extend the rebel lines further east. Once in line, the men are ordered to load their muskets and await further orders. B also brings up Captain John D. Imboden's 4-gun battery of 6-pounders from the Staunton, Virginia artillery in support. The guns drop tail in front of and between the 2 brigades as General B exclaims, "Here's the battlefield, and we are in for it." From 11:15, the Confederates on Buck Hill begin to aggressively confront Burnside's Federal thrust. Artillery shells from Imboden's battery suppresses the Rhode Islanders on Matthews Hill. The heavy shelling and increased rifle fire from the reinforced rebel line causes mounting casualties in the Rhode Island regiment's lines. The 1st Rhode Island's color sergeant, Charles Bercherer, is shot in the right shoulder and is paralyzed as the bullet passes through his spinal cord. Albert M. Burdick, the regiment's 1st colored corporal, then picks up the unit's battle flag until his arm holding the standard is shattered by a musket ball, smashing his upper arm and clipping off 2 of his fingers. Corporal Burdick drops the flag as he gazes in shock of his wound. Another corporal from the color guard then picks up the flag and carries on. On the opposite side of the field, Colonel Evans is relieved to see the arrival of reinforcements for his outmatched and now depleted brigade. On Henry House Hill, many of the newly arrived regiments go prone to avoid the heavy fire from artillery shells. Riding over to the 4th Alabama under Colonel Egbert Jones, Brigadier General B shouts, "Up, Alabamians!" and leads them forward into the fight. Down the Henry Hill they run, and they move up the steep slope of Buck Hill, all while under fire of Reynolds' battery. As Evans' men cheer the arrival of the Alabamians, B deploys the 4th Alabama in the woods, formerly occupied by Wheat's men on the right side of the 4th South Carolina. To the front is a cornfield, and beyond it is the smoke pouring from the muskets of the Federals deployed on Matthews Hill. Colonel Egbert Jones orders his men to lie down and protect themselves as much as possible. Realizing the Alabamians are insufficient to stem the Federal advance, B orders up the remainder of his command. Some of the officers give short remarks to calm the nerves of their inexperienced men. The 8th Georgia and 2nd Mississippi, together with 2 additional companies of the 11th Mississippi, moved down the hill towards the Warrenton Turnpike. The 7th Georgia of Bartow's brigade does not advance to Matthews Hill, instead occupying a reserve position in the turnpike in front of the Robinson House, a black freedman's property located east of the Henry House. The Confederate defense on Buck Hill now numbers about some 3,300 strong. With B's 3rd Brigade deploying on Matthews Hill, Evan redeploys his own Banner Brigade further west to meet the Federal advance from Dogan's Ridge. However, the battle is moving in the Union's favor as more troops from Porter's Brigade, along with the lead elements of Heintzelman's division, move up to reinforce Burnside's brigade. Heintzelman's lead brigades form their lines and begin pushing back against the outflanked Confederates. With its element of surprise lost, General McDowell orders forward Tyler's division from the Stone Bridge, pushing back Evans' skirmisher companies and moving west on the Warrenton Turnpike to outflank the Confederates on the right. Sherman's 3rd Brigade and the 1st Brigade of Colonel Erasmus D. Keyes both push across a farm ford about 100 yards above the bridge, while Schenck's 2nd Brigade crosses over the Stone Bridge itself to be held in reserve. By 11:30, the Confederate brigades in Buck Hill are outnumbered 3-1. In a desperate attempt to break the Federal lines on Matthews Hill, General B goes against his better judgment and orders the 4th Alabama to rise up from the grass and charge up the hill. The 4th Alabama's fixed bayonet charge ends in a similar manner as Wheat's charge an hour earlier. Subjected to heavy musket volleys from the 1st and 2nd Rhode Island and canister shells from Reynolds' battery, the 4th Alabama's ranks become shaken, and they are completely routed off Matthews Hill. Colonel Jones himself is among the wounded and dying sprawled across the blood-soaked grass. While the 4th Alabama is being driven back in its charge, more Federal reinforcements are beginning to pour into Confederates' right flank in the woods east of Matthews Hill, outnumbering and overlapping the troops of the 8th Georgia. The regulars of the U.S. Infantry Battalion under Major George Sykes, as well as the redeployed 71st New York and 2nd New Hampshire, both which have finally moved up to support the fighting on Matthews Hill, pour heavy musket and rifle fire into the front and right flank of the 8th Georgia, which soon breaks after its men spot even more Federal reinforcements moving up towards them in the form of the red-shirted soldiers of the 1st Minnesota. Only a few men of the 8th Georgia remain in line rather than panic and run. One of these troops, Private George T. Stovall of Company A, bravely encourages the men of his company, which is nicknamed the Rome Light Guards, to stay and fight the Yankees like men. He hoops and hollers at the Yankees while under their fire, teasing them for their poor aim. The Yankees' poor aim, as he taunts, is soon rectified. However, when a Federal bullet from a rifle volley by the regulars' battalion pierces his heart and kills him instantly. The sight of the foolishly brave Private Stovall falling dead is enough for the few remaining soldiers of the 8th Georgia left in the woods to throw down their muskets and run for safety out of the smoky thicket. As the artillery batteries of Captain James B. Ricketts and Captain Charles Griffin deploy on Dogan's Ridge to the west, they pour a hail of shells and round shot on the rebels. From 11:30 to 11:45, the badly beaten Confederate brigades on Buck Hill begin a mass retreat further south, past the stream of Young's Branch. Their retreat soon turns into a rout, as mobs of Confederate soldiers begin running for their lives toward Henry House Hill to the south. Captain Imboden's battery of the Staunton artillery provides covering fire for the Confederate retreat. By 11:45 a.m., the morning phase of the battle is over. The fight on Matthews Hill has ended in a Federal victory, and Union troops cheer as McDowell rides through their lines shouting, "Victory! Victory! The day is ours!" As the day goes on, however, Brigadier General McDowell's encouraging statement of victory will soon prove to be premature.